Thanks to your idea. It's amazing when events like this come up, and it's not often that as educators that we all kind of get together from all the different environments that we're working in. So I suppose from my perspective, I would like to be a bit more practical, as in maybe I have some practical information on what it's like on the ground in secondary and primary schools in Ireland. So as you said, a few of us set up Teachers for Palestine. A few of us had been there, and we've always been talking through the trade union movement, about Palestine. And then I suppose October the 7th happened, and then the massive attack on Palestine and Gaza that followed. We were like, well, hold on, this is crazy. This needs to stop now. And we're in schools, and nobody seems to be talking about this. And we were just flabbergasted, why is nobody in the staff room talking about this? Why are we not talking to students about it? It was just like silence and nothing happening. And we were like, well, why is this? And we started talking as a group and said, we need to do something about this. So we decided to set up Teachers for Palestine. And I suppose really in staff rooms is where we first noticed the silence. Because I think we live in our own bubble sometimes. Those who've been to Palestine don't know about Palestine. And this is not an excuse. But in our staff rooms, like nobody really knew what the history of Palestine was. Nobody knew about Zionism. Nobody knew about colonialism or knew about Palestine from that particular lens, as Banna was talking about. It was always, it's just a complicated conflict. I don't really know anything about it, so I'm just going to keep staring into my lunchbox here, So this was the kind of mentality in staff rooms, and we didn't even get to the students yet, So what we said then, well, if grown adults in our staff rooms don't know about this, how do we expect the students to even know about this? So this was the kind of crux of the process, the thinking process that we went through. And we said, well, we need to start with the students, and we need to start teaching the students. So if whenever, which is still currently hasn't, if this attack ends, there's going to be another attack, and there's going to be another attack, and there's going to be another attack. We have to try to change what people's understanding of the situation in Palestine is. And of course, that is looking at it through colonialism, looking at it through Zionism, and actually what's happening there. So we decided to set up Teachers for Palestine and try to start introducing it into lessons in our schools. So beyond that point, we noticed that a group of us, so let's say there was about 100 odd of us who got together and said, right, we're going to take this into schools. This was just individually in our individual schools first. And what we noticed coming back was, you can't teach about that here. You can't do that fundraiser here, or you can't teach about that in your history class. You can't bring in a speaker from Palestine here. You can't do these things. This is what the principals and school management were saying. Even though, as Banna pointed out, anti-Palestinian racism, the previous couple of years, there is Ukrainian flags flying outside the school. They're talking about it constantly with the students. There's fundraisers for the Ukraine, bring in all these clothes, bring in food parcels, bring in money, raise the flag, talk about what's going on. But and rightly so, but when it came to Palestine, absolute silence. We can't do that because it's too political, is what principals were saying. So we kind of looked under the hood of that a little bit. And we found really that it wasn't coming from the top. So it's not coming from the Department of Education. Really what we found was, because some principals were doing it and doing a fantastic job and really allowing teachers to run with this and so on in schools, but an awful lot, a huge amount, I would say over 90% of the feedback we got was negative, weren't allowing it. It was fear. The principals were afraid of, I don't know enough about this situation to be able to answer questions if RTE come knocking on the door of the school. Why are you teaching about Palestine? What's happening here? I won't be able to answer these questions. I don't know how to answer a question if a parent rings up and complains, because I don't know anything about the situation. So that's what we kind of found. And we were, okay, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? So we found maybe what we tried to do, one of the best ways we tried to do then towards the end of last year, was to condense it all. So everybody, we would launch a week for Palestine, where everybody in schools across the country would try and add a little bit about Palestine to their lessons in schools at the same time over the course of a week. That way, we could promote it a month in advance, 6 weeks in advance. We could do posters, we could do flyers. We could start to build momentum into this rather than every individual teacher around the country trying to go by themselves to the principal and to be knocked back. So we tried to create this week, and we call this week Let's Talk About Palestine. And we're doing it again this year in May, which I'll tell you about in a second. But so for this week, we tried to create as much resources with the 100 teachers that we had, looking at from primary school all the way up to Leaving Cert. We tried to create as many resources as we could and put them online, so teachers who didn't really know anything about it could still pick little bits and pieces of what they were going to do. And the way we found to try to do this was the most revolutionary way, if you want, as Kieran was talking about. It was not the two sides situation, it was not anything. So with primary schools, what we looked at was Palestine exists because, let's face it, they're trying to erase it from the map. So with primary schools, it was all based around the country of Palestine. Where is it? Here's a map of Palestine. Here's the flag's colours. Here's the culture. Here's the dances. Here's the food. So it was really about talking about Palestine. That's why we call it Let's Talk About Palestine. Because a lot of students, and there's a lovely children's book about a child who asks his grandmother, why is my country not on the map when they're at school? And this is the kind of the analogy that we drew from this, that we need to put Palestine on the map, and we need to make sure that all our primary kids and all children know that there is a country called Palestine. And this is what it is. And here's the beauty of it. Here's the amazing culture it has. And then when we get into secondary school, we start looking through all the different subjects. And it's very important to stick. There's loads of avenues, as Bana talked about, in our curriculum, that there's no excuse for teachers or principals not to allow this to be taught, because a lot of the curriculum can be taught through the lens of Palestine, especially with all new subjects and the way subjects are being taught nowadays. So we looked at, in secondary school, to look at Zionism, to look at colonialism, to look at all the things, racism, oppression, and to try and introduce that through all the different subjects through the lens of Palestine. So my own subject, to give you an example, is physical education, right? So in PE, there's a new Leaving Cert PE course. So you could, in that part of that PE course, talks about sports washing, right? So we can, of course, look at the money that the Israeli government pumps into sports to try and clean its image up on the international sphere, if you like. You could also, we talked about equity in sport. So, for example, FIFA, why are Israel, whilst they're committing genocide, still allowed to play in all the leagues, whereas Russia almost banned immediately after 2 or 3 weeks of their invasion. So all of these things, and this is in physical education. There's the Dakba dance that people could look at in physical education. Another thing that I did in PE was, so if we have a thing called Sport Ed, where a team, 5 or 6 teams would set up over the course of 6 weeks, let's say, they would play each other in a league. We looked at towns that were prior to 1948 were taken over by Israel. What were those towns called prior to 1948? And then the students would have to go away, find out about them, with the population, etc., etc. What happened to town? Why is it no longer there? And then they would represent that town in their league over the few weeks in PE. So there's loads of opportunity to teach about Palestine in PE and in all subjects. As Bana already went through, art, went through geography, went through history. They're all the obvious ones. You have all the different languages. There's loads and loads of opportunity, and there's actually no excuse for us not to teach it. For a lot of it, for 99% of it, you don't even have to go to your principal. You can just teach your subject using the curriculum and just using Palestine as the lens. So there's no real excuse there. Other areas that we try is bringing in speakers. We've brought in speakers from Palestinians who are here living in Ireland. A lot of them who have actually been there at the beginning of the genocide and managed to get out earlier on. We can bring them, and we've brought them into schools. We brought one into my own school to talk to students. But again, there is kickback here, but it's just about perseverance. And as Brendan said, it's about being brave. It's about saying, you know, I'm not taking no for an answer here. And it's really getting together as teachers and I suppose across the country and standing together. That's why we did the whole week thing, rather than individuals going here and going there. But I mean, that's one of the things that we try. And I'll share my screen briefly, and just to show you, if I can share my screen here. This is what we did last year. Okay, so this is the poster that we sent out to all schools. You can see some of the things that schools can do: fly the flag in their community, outside of school, access teaching resources on the QR code. I'll show you those in a second briefly. Hold a fundraiser in your school, organise collective shows of solidarity in your school. Some of our schools went down to walk the petition protest. They joined in that. So there's lots of students actually becoming active in this. And of course, it's all voluntary. We're not telling this class you have to go. It's if you want to go, some students out of the class will volunteer, will go. And this happened in quite a few places around the country. Lots of schools took part in this. Send written or video message support to children in Palestine. Again, we have all contacts with teachers on the ground in Palestine and students who are there currently in Gaza at the moment. Some of them, of course, have been killed, which is really, really upsetting for a lot of us in the Teachers for Palestine group. Stage arts, sport, writing, drama competitions, petition to make your school a apartheid-free zone. Again, really, really important here. So these are a lot of the groups, as you can see, who would be involved, who of course, helped us out last year. So you can see a lot of them here today. You can see Kolov, you can see Centre for Global Education. You can see lots of some of the groups that would be part of IDEA were here. We're going to do that again this year. It's on the 5th of May this year, the 5th to the 10th of May. I think it's the 6th actually, and it's the Monday, the 6th to the 10th of May this year. So you see we have guidelines for schools, okay, what to say, what not to say, how to approach it, etc., etc. You can have a read of those yourselves. And then, of course, we have all the resources set up here. And this is where I'd like to ask this meeting, if anybody is a teacher here, or even anybody lecturing anyone, if you have any resources that you think would be helpful, PowerPoints, even clips on YouTube or anything that could fit into any of these categories. I can stick the link in the chat in a second. You can see first, second class, third class, all the way through primary schools, secondary school. We have some Kolov resources there. Trocra were very good as well to give us some of their resources. We'll be adding to that as well. And then we have the apartheid-free schools. How do you try to make your school an apartheid-free? And a lot of the transition year groups, for example, in secondary schools, took up that apartheid-free thing, and we're going around their schools getting petitions and so on. So there is loads of ways in primary and secondary that we can introduce Palestine and act as a fight back, I suppose, against Zionism, against the oppression that's happening there. But also what we found as well in schools, a lot of students start to look at their own environment then and their own selves, and have a look back at their own Irish history and so on. And it opens up their world, and people then start talking about what's happening in the Congo and Sudan and in all these places. It really opens the world for students into the wider world, I suppose, where IDEA is concerned as well. So I think it's really, really important that we do talk a lot more in our schools about Palestine, and to realise that there is loads and loads of teachers out there who are doing it, and you're not alone, and to try and stand up against principals who say no, and try to educate them. This is why we need to do this, as Kieran was talking about. And I think that's my time up anyway. So